The planet Triva was once a beacon of hope and progress in the galaxy. Long ago, it had been home to an advanced alien species known as the Trivens. Their civilization was built on technology that many other species envied. Their cities were gleaming towers of glass and metal, with energy sources that could power entire star systems. The Trivens had a culture of knowledge and innovation, and their society flourished. They made great strides in medicine, space exploration, and art. But then, disaster struck. A cataclysmic event, brought on by a war between powerful factions, left their planet shattered. The once thriving cities were reduced to ruins, and most of the population was either wiped out or scattered across the galaxy. For years, the Trivens were left to fend for themselves. No one came to their aid. The other civilizations that once revered them turned their backs, deeming the Trivens' plight as hopeless. To many, they had become a forgotten race, a relic of a past civilization no longer worth saving. But not everyone forgot. On a distant starship, the human exploration fleet had heard whispers of the abandoned Trivens. It was said that the humans had long been curious about the alien race's incredible achievements, and when they stumbled upon records of Triva's fall, they decided to investigate. Unlike the other races who saw the Trivens as expendable, the humans were different. They were driven by curiosity, compassion, and a sense of justice. The humans arrived at Triva's orbit under the leadership of Captain Lucas Harding, a young and determined officer who had spent years studying ancient alien cultures. Harding knew that the Trivens were a species worth saving. He understood that even a race as powerful as the Trivens could fall, and that the humans had a responsibility to help. The human fleet descended toward Triva's surface, where the scene was nothing like what the humans had expected. The planet was a shadow of its former glory. The skies were covered with dark clouds, remnants of the destruction that had ravaged the planet. The cities that once sparkled now lay in ruins, with buildings half collapsed and the streets eerily quiet. There were no signs of a thriving population, only a handful of survivors scattered across the barren land. As the human fleet touched down, Captain Harding ordered his crew to prepare for a ground expedition. They were to find the Trivens, assess their condition, and offer assistance. Harding was determined to bring hope to these forgotten aliens. He knew the journey would not be easy, but he believed that the humans had something that could make a difference, a gift that the Trivens desperately needed: hope. The first contact with the Trivens was not as peaceful as Harding had hoped. The Trivens had grown suspicious of outsiders, especially after years of being abandoned by other civilizations. A group of Trivens, covered in the ragged remains of their old clothing, confronted the humans as they landed near a ruined city. Their eyes were cold, filled with distrust. They had been betrayed too many times by other races and had learned to view outsiders as threats rather than saviors. "Who are you?" one of the Trivens demanded in a shaky voice. "Why have you come to our planet?" Harding stepped forward, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "We are humans," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We came to help. Your world has been abandoned, but we haven't forgotten you. We want to offer you our assistance, help you rebuild." The Trivens eyed him warily, their weapons still drawn. They had lived in fear for so long that they no longer knew what trust felt like. "We don't need your help," another Triven spat. "We are no longer worth saving. You will only waste your time here." Harding's heart ached. He could see the pain in their eyes, the weight of years spent in suffering and solitude. He couldn't blame them for feeling hopeless, but he knew there was a way forward. "We understand your pain," Harding said softly, "but we believe in the value of all life, even those who have been forgotten. We want to help you rebuild, to bring back what you've lost." The tension in the air was thick, but after what felt like an eternity, one of the Trivens stepped forward. She was older than the others, with a face weathered by hardship, but her eyes still held a spark of hope. Her name was Ilara. "We will not trust you right away," Ilara said, her voice steady, "but we will listen. Show us what you can do." With that, the first seeds of trust were planted. It wouldn't be easy. The Trivens had been abandoned for too long, and they had no reason to believe that the humans would be any different from the others who had ignored them. But Harding knew this was the beginning of something important. The humans weren't just offering help, they were offering something more. They were offering the Trivens the chance to hope again. And for the first time in years, Ilara allowed herself to believe it might be possible. Captain Lucas Harding and his crew stood at the edge of the ruined city, staring at the desolate landscape before them. The Trivens had agreed to listen, but the road ahead was unclear. They needed to prove themselves, to show the Trivens that their words weren't just empty promises. Harding knew the human team had something valuable to offer, but convincing the Trivens of that would take more than just kind words. It would take action. The humans began by offering medical aid. Many of the Trivens were sick, suffering from infections, malnutrition, and injuries sustained over the years of survival in harsh conditions. The human medical team, led by Dr. Sarah Jensen, set up a temporary clinic inside a crumbling building. They worked tirelessly to treat the Trivens, using advanced technology that the aliens had long since lost the ability to maintain. At first, the Trivens were hesitant. They had endured so much over the years that they no longer trusted anyone who promised to help. Ilara, the older Triven woman who had spoken to Harding earlier, was one of the first to enter the makeshift clinic. Her eyes were filled with doubt as she observed the human doctors at work. "What makes you think you can heal us?" Ilara asked, her voice filled with skepticism. "We have tried everything, and still we suffer. What can you possibly do that others haven't?" Dr. Jensen, a soft-spoken woman with years of experience, smiled kindly at Ilara. "We don't have all the answers, but we have something that may help, hope. And sometimes, that's more important than any treatment." Ilara wasn't convinced, but she watched as the human doctors carefully treated a young Triven child who had been suffering from a severe infection. Within hours, the child's condition improved. It was a small victory, but it was enough to make Ilara pause. Perhaps the humans could offer something after all. As the days passed, the humans continued their work, repairing old medical equipment, offering new treatments, and rebuilding some of the basic infrastructure that the Trivens had lost. The humans didn't stop at just healing the body. They also began to heal the spirit. The human crew spent time talking with the Trivens, learning about their culture, their history, and their dreams for the future. Harding spent many hours speaking with Ilara. Though still cautious, she began to open up, sharing stories of the Trivens' past glory and the tragic downfall that had followed. She told Harding of the many attempts to rebuild their world, only to be met with failure. She spoke of the other alien civilizations that had once seen the Trivens as powerful allies, only to abandon them when the Trivens could no longer defend themselves. "We were once a great civilization," Ilara said one evening, her voice tinged with sadness. "Now we are just a shadow of what we once were. You speak of rebuilding, but we have tried and failed. What if it is too late for us?" Harding listened carefully, his heart aching at the pain in Ilara's voice. "I can't promise that everything will be easy," he said, "but I can promise that we'll try. We won't leave you behind, like everyone else did. We're here for the long haul." As the humans and Trivens worked together, the atmosphere on the planet began to change. The humans' determination and optimism were infectious, slowly breaking through the walls of distrust the Trivens had built over the years. More and more Trivens came forward, eager to receive help. The humans shared their knowledge freely, teaching the Trivens how to repair their old technology and even introducing new methods of farming and resource management. It was clear that the humans weren't just offering help, they were offering a partnership, a chance to rebuild together. One day, as Harding and Ilara walked through the ruins of what had once been a bustling Triven marketplace, Harding couldn't help but feel a sense of hope rising within him. The streets, though still mostly empty, were no longer completely silent. Trivens were starting to rebuild, clearing away debris, and even starting to restore some of the buildings that had once been the heart of their civilization. "We've started," Ilara said quietly as they walked. "It's slow, but we're beginning to believe that it might work. Maybe we can rebuild after all." Harding smiled, feeling a sense of pride for the Trivens and his crew. "This is just the beginning, Ilara. Together, we can do great things." But not everyone was on board with the humans' plan. Some of the more traditional Trivens, still haunted by their past failures, were resistant to the changes. They viewed the humans with suspicion, questioning whether they could really help. One such Triven, a man named Kor, voiced his concerns openly. "You cannot fix what has been broken for so long," Kor argued one evening. "The humans will leave us eventually, just like the others did. And when they do, we will be alone again." Harding could feel the tension rising. He understood Kor's fears, but he also knew that fear could be overcome with action. "We won't leave," Harding said firmly, "and we're not here to fix everything in a day. But if we work together, we'll find a way to make it work. Trust me." It was clear that the road ahead would not be easy. There were still many challenges to overcome, and not all the Trivens were ready to accept the help of the humans. But as the days passed, a small glimmer of hope began to grow, not just in the Trivens' hearts, but in their actions. They were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, their future didn't have to be one of isolation and despair. The humans had proven that they were not like the others. They had shown up when no one else would, and they had stayed when others would have turned away. And for the first time in a long while, the Trivens dared to hope that perhaps their story wasn't over after all. The days on Triva slowly turned into weeks, and with each passing day, a new sense of purpose filled the air. The once abandoned planet was showing signs of life again, though progress was slow. The humans, with their advanced technology and knowledge, worked tirelessly alongside the Trivens, helping to restore what had been lost. Despite the initial hesitation, the Trivens were beginning to believe in the possibility of rebuilding their civilization. Captain Harding and his team had been working day and night, creating small but significant improvements. They had set up more medical facilities, provided food and clean water, and even helped rebuild some of the crumbling roads and bridges. Slowly but surely, the planet began to transform from a forgotten wasteland to a place where hope started to take root again. One of the most significant changes was the human-Triven cooperation in agriculture. Dr. Sarah Jensen, who had been studying the Triven environment for months, suggested introducing new farming methods. The Trivens, who had long relied on old techniques, had lost their ability to produce enough food to feed their remaining population. Dr. Jensen introduced crop rotation and modern irrigation systems, and with the help of the Trivens, they began to rebuild their agricultural foundation. As the first crops started to grow, the Trivens couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They had seen so much destruction in their lives, but now, for the first time in years, they were witnessing the start of something good. The fields, once barren and lifeless, were now beginning to sprout with new crops. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Ilara, who had once been skeptical of the humans, now walked through the fields with a sense of awe. She watched as the humans and Trivens worked together, side by side, in the warm sunlight. It was a sight she had never thought she would see again, a sign that perhaps, after all this time, the Trivens were not doomed. "I never thought I would see this day," Ilara said, her voice soft as she stood beside Harding. "I remember when our fields were full of life, and now they are starting to come back." Harding smiled. "You've done it, Ilara. You and your people. We're just here to help, but you're the ones who have made this possible." Ilara's eyes shimmered with something between gratitude and disbelief. "It's hard to believe. So many others gave up on us. But now I see the light again." But not all the Trivens shared Ilara's optimism. Kor, the Triven who had been vocal about his distrust of the humans, remained suspicious. He saw the improvements around him but refused to accept that the humans would stay for long. He still feared that once the humans had done all they could, They would abandon the Trivens as the other civilizations had done in the past. "Don't let your guard down," Kor warned Ilara one evening. "The humans may be here now, but they will leave once they've done enough. They will never stay." Ilara turned to Kor, a hint of frustration in her voice. "You still don't trust them, do you?" "No," Kor replied firmly. "I've seen too much betrayal in my life. I can't simply forget what's happened to us before. The humans may help, but they will leave. And then we'll be alone once more." Harding, who had overheard the conversation, stepped forward. "I understand your fears, Kor," he said calmly. "But we are not like the others. We came here to stay, to help you rebuild. We're not leaving until you don't need us anymore." Kor didn't respond immediately, but his gaze softened ever so slightly. He was still skeptical, but Harding's sincerity was hard to ignore. He had seen the humans' actions, and they were different from anyone who had come before them. Yet old wounds ran deep, and trust would take time to build. As the weeks continued, the human crew continued to support the Trivens. They shared their knowledge of space exploration, teaching the Trivens how to repair their old starships and even giving them access to some of their own advanced technology. The Trivens, once isolated and defeated, were starting to see the world in a new light. They weren't alone anymore. One day, as Harding and Ilara stood overlooking the city, now slowly being rebuilt, Ilara turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "When we first met, I never thought I'd trust you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But now I see. You've done more than just give us resources. You've given us something far more valuable: hope." Harding nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "Hope is a powerful thing, Ilara, and sometimes it's all a person needs to rebuild." The Trivens were beginning to understand this truth. They had once believed that their civilization was lost forever, but now, thanks to the humans, they were beginning to believe that anything was possible. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges ahead, but they had taken the first steps toward recovery. And for the first time in a long time, the Trivens dared to dream again. As the sun began to set over the planet, casting a golden light over the fields and the ruins of the city, Harding knew that this was just the beginning. There was still much work to be done, but with the humans and Trivens working side by side, there was no limit to what they could achieve. Together, they would rebuild, and together, they would prove that even the most forgotten and broken civilizations could rise again. The sun rose over Treva, casting a warm glow across the newly planted fields. The air, once thick with dust and despair, now felt fresh, almost alive with possibility. The work was far from finished, but there was a sense of change in the atmosphere. Captain Lucas Harding stood at the edge of the Triven settlement, watching as his team worked alongside the locals to rebuild their world. There was something different today, something that had begun to stir in the hearts of the Trivens, a growing belief that they could rise from the ashes of their past. But not everyone was fully convinced. Kor, the Triven who had long mistrusted the humans, had begun to see the changes, but his wariness still lingered. He kept to himself, quietly observing the efforts of the human team, but rarely engaging with them. Ilara, on the other hand, was becoming more vocal about her growing trust in the humans. She believed in the partnership they had started, even if others were still uncertain. The humans had introduced new agricultural techniques, built better homes, and helped repair the damaged infrastructure. Their advancements were clear, and the Trivens had learned much from them. Yet, Kor still wasn't ready to embrace them completely. One day, as Harding and Ilara walked through the partially restored city, they noticed Kor standing near the edge of the settlement, staring at the sky. The look on his face was one of deep contemplation, but also of hesitation. Ilara approached him cautiously. "Kor, you've been quiet lately," she said, her voice gentle. "Is everything all right?" Kor's eyes were fixed on the horizon. He didn't look at her as he replied. "It's too good to be true, Ilara. I've seen too many promises broken. Too many times we were left alone. Why should we trust that these humans are different? Ilara sighed, understanding his fears. I know it's hard to believe, Kor. But look around you. We're not alone anymore. We have something we didn't have before. A chance. We have the humans, and we have each other. Kor shook his head. I want to believe you. I want to believe in what you say. But after everything we've been through, how can I just forget the past? Harding stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. Kor, I understand your pain. No one can erase what's happened. But we're not here to make the same mistakes. We're here to build something different, something lasting. We're not going anywhere. Not unless you don't need us anymore. The words hit Kor harder than he had expected. He turned to face Harding, his expression softening slightly. I hear you, human. But trust is not something given easily, even if you mean what you say. I know, Harding replied. And I won't ask for it. But I'll prove it to you. I'll show you with actions, not just words. Kor was silent for a long moment, staring at Harding as though searching for any sign of insincerity. But all he saw was the determination in the human's eyes, the same determination that had driven the crew to help the Trivens when others had abandoned them. Finally, Kor nodded slowly. I will watch, he said, his voice low but not unkind. And maybe, just maybe, I will believe. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Harding knew it would take time to fully earn Kor's trust, but this small step meant more than words could express. Over the next few weeks, the alliance between the humans and Trivens continued to grow. The human crew didn't just work on the planet's surface. They also began sharing their knowledge of space travel. They taught the Trivens how to repair their damaged starships, bringing the once-forgotten fleet back to life. The Trivens had always been a spacefaring species, but their technology had decayed over time. With the help of the humans, they were starting to rebuild their fleet, one ship at a time. Dr. Sarah Jensen, who had played a crucial role in the medical efforts, now focused on teaching the Trivens how to use advanced health diagnostics and treatment methods. They also introduced the Trivens to sustainable energy sources, which could help revitalize their planet in the long term. It was a collaboration on a level the Trivens had never experienced before, and slowly, the walls of skepticism that had once stood so high began to crumble. But despite all the progress, not everyone was convinced. Some of the Trivens were still wary. They had been betrayed too many times before to trust so easily. One evening, a group of the more traditional Trivens gathered to discuss their future. They had seen the humans' efforts, but they were not yet ready to place their faith in them. We cannot rely on them, one of the leaders said, his voice harsh. They will leave when we no longer need them. We should prepare ourselves, as we always have. We cannot afford to be weak. Ilara, who had been listening in silence, stood up. Weak? We are not weak. We are rebuilding. We are learning. And we are not alone. If we shut ourselves off from the humans, we risk losing the only chance we have to survive. The room fell silent. Kor, who had been standing in the back, looked toward Ilara with a thoughtful expression. He knew the truth in her words, but old fears still gripped him. The fear of being abandoned once again. We must make a choice, Ilara continued, her voice steady. We can either keep fighting our past and continue to live in fear, or we can trust that there is hope for us. The humans are not like the others. We've seen it. They're here to stay. Her words resonated with more Trivens than she had expected. Slowly, one by one, they began to nod in agreement. Kor stood in silence, his mind torn between fear and hope. And so the decision was made. The Trivens would take a chance on the humans. It would not be easy, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, they felt they had something worth fighting for. As the meeting came to an end, Harding met with Ilara outside. She gave him a small smile. It's not much, but it's a start. Harding returned the smile. It's all we need. The days were growing longer, and the city of Trivok continued to show signs of progress. The once crumbling structures were being rebuilt, and the fields that had once been barren now stretched green and full of life. The humans had made their mark, teaching the Trivens new ways of working and living. Yet despite the growing trust between the two species, an unspoken tension still lingered. Captain Lucas Harding stood at the observation post, looking out over the fields. Behind him, the hum of machinery and the sound of work being done filled the air. The humans and Trivens had come a long way in such a short time, but Harding knew the road ahead would not be without its obstacles. There were still many who resisted change, who saw the humans not as allies, but as intruders. Ilara, who had become one of the most vocal advocates for cooperation between the two species, stood beside him, watching the same view. She could see it too, the hope, but also the lingering fear. It was the same fear that Kor had felt, and that many others still carried in their hearts. "I wonder," Ilara began, her voice thoughtful, "how long it will take before we're fully accepted, before the last of the doubt disappears." Harding sighed. "I wish I knew, but I can't rush them. Trust is earned, not forced. Do you ever think we'll face a threat from outside? Something neither of us can handle alone?" Ilara asked, looking up at the sky as if searching for an answer. Harding turned to her, his face serious. "It's always possible. There are forces out there that wouldn't care to see us succeed, forces that might want to see us fail." Ilara nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She had lived through many hardships, but the idea of facing an enemy with the humans was new to her. The Trivens had always been independent, but the humans had shown them the value of unity. If they were to face any danger, it would have to be together. As if on cue, a warning siren suddenly blared through the air, its sound sharp and urgent. Harding's eyes immediately narrowed. It was a sound none of them wanted to hear. He turned quickly, signaling for the rest of his crew to assemble. "What's happening?" Ilara asked, her heart pounding. "We'll find out soon enough," Harding said, already moving toward the communications center. Inside the command room, Lieutenant Harris was already at the main console, scanning through the incoming data. His face was grim. "Captain, we've detected an unknown fleet on the outer rim of the system," Harris reported, his voice tense. "It's not a standard Trivan ship, and it's not human. The ships are armed and moving fast." Harding's heart skipped a beat. The last thing they needed was a new threat. Any indication of who they are? "We're still working on it, sir," Harris replied. "But they're coming straight for us. If they don't change course, we'll be in their path within the hour." Ilara, who had entered the room with Harding, exchanged a glance with him. "What should we do?" Harding's mind raced, but his expression remained calm. "We prepare for the worst, hope for the best." He turned to Harris. "Send a message to all Trivan leaders. We need everyone on high alert. We don't know who they are, but we can't afford to be caught off guard." As Harris began sending out the alerts, Harding walked over to the window, staring out at the horizon. The peaceful landscape that had become so familiar now felt like a false sense of security. He had hoped the Trivens would be able to rebuild without fear of new enemies, but it seemed fate had other plans. Ilara stood beside him, her voice quiet. "Do you think it's the Confederation? Maybe they're coming to stop us." Harding shook his head. "The Confederation wouldn't come this far without warning. No, this feels different. Whoever they are, they're not here for peace." The unknown fleet continued its approach, the tension growing thicker with every passing minute. Harding knew that if this was an attack, it would be a test not only of the humans and Trivens' ability to fight together, but also of their trust in one another. If they could not come together in this moment, everything they had worked for would be in jeopardy. "Get to your stations," Harding ordered. "Prepare for battle, but don't engage unless they fire first. We're not looking for a fight." As his crew dispersed, Harding and Ilara exchanged a final look. It was a look of uncertainty, but also of determination. They had built something together, something worth protecting, and they would do whatever it took to defend it. In the distance, the enemy fleet drew closer. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and neither the humans nor the Trivens were ready to back down. In the silence that followed, one thought echoed in Harding's mind. They may be out there, but we are not alone anymore. Together, we stand. The tension in the air was palpable. The Trivens and humans stood side by side, their hearts racing as the unknown fleet approached. The sun hummed low in the sky, casting long shadows over the settlement of Triva, a stark contrast to the storm of uncertainty brewing in the distance. Captain Lucas Harding stood on the command deck of the human ship, his eyes scanning the view screen. The fleet of unfamiliar ships had grown larger, their shapes now clearly visible. "We're running out of time," Harding muttered to himself, his mind working quickly to calculate their options. His crew, though visibly tense, remained focused. This was not their first battle, but it was the first time they would be fighting for someone else, someone they had come to care about. Ilara stepped up beside him, her gaze fixed on the enemy fleet. "Do you think they'll attack?" she asked, her voice steady, though there was an underlying note of fear. Harding's jaw tightened. "It's hard to say, but we can't take any chances." The unknown ships moved closer, and it became clear that they weren't just passing through. Their course was set, straight for Triva. The human fleet had been placed in a defensive position, ready to shield the Trivens and their new allies, but there was only so much they could do if the enemy didn't communicate. "Open a channel," Harding ordered. The crew immediately went to work, trying to establish contact with the approaching fleet. After a few moments of static, a figure appeared on the view screen. A tall alien with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. Their skin was a dark shade of blue, and their armor gleamed under the light. The alien spoke in a language no one in the room recognized. "It's no use," Lieutenant Harris said, shaking his head. "We can't translate in time." Harding clenched his fists. They had tried every method of communication available, but nothing had worked. It seemed the enemy wasn't interested in speaking. They were intent on coming in fast and strong. "Prepare to engage," Harding said, his voice commanding but calm. "We'll defend this world." Ilara turned to him. "We're not just fighting for Triva anymore, are we? We're fighting for everything we've built here. For the future." Harding nodded. "We're fighting for all of us." The first shots rang out, tearing through the silence. The enemy fleet unleashed a barrage of energy blasts that rocked the human ships. The humans retaliated, firing back with precision. The Trivens, though still learning the art of combat, quickly adapted, providing support from the ground. Their ships, though older, had been repaired with human technology, and they were more than capable of holding their ground. "Stay focused," Harding shouted as another wave of fire hit the shields. "We need to buy time for the civilians. Ilara, get the evacuation plan in place." Ilara moved swiftly, relaying orders to the Trivens to begin evacuating the most vulnerable members of their population. The humans had already set up a network of safe zones across the settlement, ready to shelter those who needed protection. The citizens of Triva, once hesitant and fearful, now stood tall, knowing that they had the help they so desperately needed. On the front lines, the battle raged. The humans and Trivens fought side by side, their combined strength proving to be a force that the unknown fleet had not anticipated. The enemy had underestimated the resilience of the Trivens, as well as the power of the human technology. They were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect a future they had never dared to dream of. Kor, the once skeptical Triven, now found himself in the thick of the battle. He had hesitated before, unsure if he could trust the humans. But now, with the first shots fired and the enemy closing in, he knew this was no longer a matter of trust. It was a matter of survival. "Stay sharp," Kor shouted to his fellow Trivens as he fired at an approaching enemy vessel. His heart pounded in his chest, but there was no fear now, only determination. He was not alone. They were not alone. The battle stretched on for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. The enemy fleet was strong, But the humans and Trivens were determined. The combined force of two species, each with its own unique strengths, was proving to be a formidable opponent. Harding's ship took another hit, shaking violently. He braced himself, his mind focused. "Status report," he barked. "We're holding, sir," Harris replied, his voice strained. "But the enemy's not letting up. We need reinforcements." "We can't wait for reinforcements," Harding said, his voice resolute. "We've got to finish this now." Ilara was in constant communication with the ground forces, ensuring that everyone was safely evacuated to the shelters. She moved quickly, coordinating the effort with precision. She had no time to be afraid. She had no time to doubt. This was their moment, the moment where they would prove to the universe that they were worth saving. As the battle continued, the tide began to turn. The enemy fleet, realizing they were being outmatched, began to retreat. Their ships, damaged and disoriented, turned away from Triva, heading back toward the outer rim of the system. "We did it," Harding said, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "We held them off." Ilara stood by his side, her expression one of pride. "We did it. Together." Though the battle was won, the war was far from over. The unknown fleet had retreated for now, but Harding knew that they would be back. The threat had not disappeared, but it had been pushed back for the time being. The humans and Trivens stood together, looking at the horizon, knowing that they had fought for something greater than themselves. The future of Triva and their alliance was now secure. But they would remain vigilant. The battle for their survival was far from over, and they would face whatever challenges came next, together. The dust had settled. The battlefield, once filled with the sounds of explosions and the flashing lights of weapons fire, now lay quiet under the fading light of a setting sun. The fleet of unknown invaders had retreated, their ships vanishing into the depths of space. The Trivan settlement, though scared by the conflict, stood strong, its people working together to repair the damage and restore what had been lost. Captain Lucas Harding stood on the command deck of the human ship, looking out at the horizon. He felt both a sense of relief and a quiet sadness. They had won the battle, but the victory came with a price. Some of the humans and Trivens had been injured, and a few lives had been lost. Yet despite the hardships, there was hope. There was always hope. Ilara, standing beside him, smiled softly. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. Harding nodded, his gaze still fixed on the distant stars. "We did, but the war is far from over. We've bought ourselves some time, but we need to prepare for whatever comes next." "Will they come back?" Ilara asked, a touch of worry in her voice. "I don't know," Harding admitted, "but if they do, we'll be ready." The humans and Trivens had worked together in ways neither species had imagined. The alliance that had seemed so fragile only weeks ago had grown stronger in the face of adversity. They had learned to rely on each other, to trust each other, and to fight together. It was a bond that could not be broken. In the days that followed, the humans and Trivens worked tirelessly to rebuild. The damage to the city was significant, but it was nothing they couldn't fix. The people of Triva, who had once been fearful and uncertain, now took pride in their shared victory. They had proven that they could stand together, that they could protect what was theirs. Kor, the Trivan who had once doubted the humans, now stood proudly among them. He had fought side by side with them, and in that moment, he understood the strength of unity. The fear that had once clouded his mind had been replaced by something stronger, a deep sense of respect and gratitude. As he walked through the streets of the settlement, Kor saw the faces of the people around him. The humans and Trivens were no longer separate. They were one, bound together by the experiences they had shared. He had been wrong to doubt them. The humans had saved them, and now they were family. Ilara, too, had changed. She had always believed in the potential of the alliance, but seeing the humans fight for her people had strengthened her faith in their shared future. They were no longer just allies. They were partners. Together, they could accomplish anything. The next few weeks were spent rebuilding not just the city, but the trust between the two species. The humans taught the Trivens new ways of construction, while the Trivens shared their knowledge of farming and the land. They worked side by side, creating something greater than either could have done alone. As the settlement began to look like it had before the battle, Harding walked through the streets with Ilara by his side. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and conversation, the once silent streets now alive with the energy of new beginnings. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Ilara said, her eyes scanning the bustling town. "We've come so far in such a short time." Harding smiled. "We have. But this is just the beginning. We have a long way to go, but I believe in this." Ilara looked up at the sky, the stars beginning to twinkle above them. "Do you think the universe is watching us?" Harding thought for a moment. "Maybe, but even if they are, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we've proven something to ourselves. We've shown that when people come together, no matter how different they are, they can overcome anything." The peaceful silence between them was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Kor came into view, his posture proud but humble. "Captain Harding," Kor said, his voice steady, "I wanted to thank you for everything. Without your help, we wouldn't be here." Harding extended a hand, and Kor took it firmly. "We all helped, Kor. This victory belongs to everyone." The three of them stood together, watching as the first stars of the evening appeared above the settlement. The road ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, new threats, and tests of their resolve. But for the first time, they had hope. Hope for a future where humans and Trivens would stand united, facing whatever came their way. "We're not just surviving anymore," Harding said, his voice filled with certainty. "We're thriving." Ilara nodded, her eyes bright with a future full of possibilities. "And we'll do it together." As the night fell over the settlement, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. The humans and Trivens had come through the storm. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. They had proven to themselves and to the universe that when people choose to stand together, there is no force that can tear them apart. The future of Triva, of the alliance between these two species, was bright. And as long as they stood united, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The dawn of a new age had begun.